You know her as Aunt Esther from Sanford and Son, the fiery woman who could make Red Fox himself tremble with just a swing of her purse. But behind those church dresses and that sharp tongue was a woman whose real story reads like something out of a movie. Her name was LaWanda Page, and her journey from literally dancing with fire to becoming a television icon is filled with tragedy, triumph, and secrets that would remain hidden until her final days in an abandoned house that held more mysteries than anyone could imagine. Picture this: a young girl named Alberta Richmond, born on a crisp October day in 1920, somewhere between Alabama and Mississippi. Even the records can't agree on exactly where she came from, as if her story was meant to be mysterious from the very beginning. Her mother, Estella, wasn't content with small-town life. When Alberta was still just a child, Estella packed up their belongings, left her husband Willie Richmond behind, and headed north to Cleveland, Ohio, searching for something better. There she found love again with a man named Charles Murray, and they started fresh with new names and new dreams. But little Alberta was never meant for ordinary life. Even as a child, she had fire in her soul that couldn't be contained. Every single day, she would gather for neighborhood girls and march down to Cleveland's black business district. They would line up on the sidewalk like soldiers ready for battle, except their weapon was dance. Alberta would step forward, and magic would happen. Whether it was the Charleston, the Black Bottom, or the cakewalk, she moved like music itself had taken human form. People would stop whatever they were doing just to watch this little girl command the street like it was her personal stage. The crowds loved her so much that they would throw coins at her feet, and on a good day, she could collect 22 cents. That might not sound like much now, but for a child during those times, it was like striking gold. Her talent was so obvious that the local community center, the Friendly and Settlement, started booking her for regular performances. She was becoming a star before she even understood what stardom meant. Then life changed everything. The family moved to St. Louis, and those magical sidewalk performances came to an end. Alberta found herself in unfamiliar streets, attending Banneker Elementary School, trying to fit into a normal life that felt too small for her dreams. But fate had other plans. At school, she met a younger boy who was just as hungry for something bigger. His name was John Elroy Sanford, though the world would later know him as Red Fox. These two kids became best friends, spending their days putting on pretend shows, telling jokes, and dreaming about bright lights and big stages. Alberta saw herself dancing under spotlights, while John imagined himself making people laugh until their sides hurt. They were both dreamers in a world that didn't have much room for dreams, especially not for young black children. But they held on to those dreams like precious treasures. As they grew older, life pulled them in different directions. Red left for Chicago, chasing opportunities and adventures. Alberta stayed in St. Louis, still believing that somehow, someway, she would find her path to stardom. Street dancing wasn't enough anymore, and professional training was impossible for a young black teenager, but she refused to give up. She practiced at house parties and community events, her body growing taller and more graceful, her movements becoming more confident with each performance. It was during this time that she caught the attention of John Peel, a man who seemed to offer everything she thought she wanted. He was older, well-dressed, and full of promises about the future. Alberta, still just a teenager, married him in 1934, when she was barely out of childhood. She thought marriage would be her ticket to security and happiness, but reality hit hard and fast. John couldn't provide for her the way he had promised. They had no money, no home of their own, and ended up living with her mother. Alberta felt trapped in a decision she was too young to make. But instead of giving up, she did what she had always done when life got difficult. She danced. At just 15 years old, she entered the dangerous world of nightclub entertainment. The competition was brutal, filled with seasoned performers who had been doing this for years. But Alberta had something special. She studied the other dancers, learned their tricks, and then added her own unique flavor to every performance. By the time she turned 18, Alberta had transformed herself into something extraordinary. She wasn't just a dancer anymore. She was a fire dancer, and she had earned a stage name that matched her power. The Bronze Goddess. Picture this: a stunning woman in a shimmering two-piece bikini, moving across the stage like liquid gold. But the real magic happened when her assistant brought out a bowl of oil. Alberta would dip her fingers into it, and with skills that seemed to defy nature itself, she would set her fingertips on fire. The crowd would gasp as she danced with flames flowing from her hands like she was some kind of mythical creature. But she wasn't finished. She would walk down into the audience, find someone trying to light a cigarette, and use her burning fingers to light it for them. The audience went absolutely wild every single time. This wasn't just entertainment. It was pure magic happening right before their eyes. But behind all the glamour and excitement, Alberta's personal life was falling apart. Despite their struggles, she was still married to John Peel, and they had welcomed a daughter named Clara Estella Peel. Now she wasn't just performing for herself. She was performing to support her child. So she pushed herself even harder, adding new elements to her act. Soon, she wasn't just dancing with fire in her hands. She was walking on fire itself, gliding across open flames like they were nothing more than warm carpet. Then tragedy struck. John Peel died suddenly, leaving Alberta alone with a young daughter to raise. Her mother was still around to help, but the weight of survival fell squarely on Alberta's shoulders. She wasn't performing for applause anymore. She was performing to keep her family alive, so she took the most dangerous step of her career. She started swallowing fire. This earned her a new title, the Flame Goddess. People traveled from far and wide just to see this incredible woman who could make fire do whatever she wanted. Her act was so spectacular that an international touring company invited her to join them. For nearly 10 years, she traveled the world, bringing her fire show to audiences who had never seen anything like it. During this time, she found love again and remarried, but heartbreak followed her like a shadow. Her second husband also died, leaving her to grieve alone once more. As the years passed, audiences began wanting something different. Fire dancing wasn't enough to shock them anymore. That's when Alberta made a decision that almost cost her everything. She found a man who owned a boa constrictor and asked to borrow it for her show. Imagine the scene: a beautiful woman with a massive snake wrapped around her body, still swallowing flaming rods while the serpent moved across her skin. For 2 performances, it was absolutely electrifying. But on the third night, everything went wrong. The snake panicked, shot up around her neck, and began squeezing. Alberta started stomping, spinning, and flailing like her life depended on it, because it did. 2 stagehands rushed in and managed to pry the snake off her just in time. But Alberta wasn't about to let that snake get away with nearly killing her. She grabbed it, dragged it outside, and chopped its head clean off. That was the last time she ever shared a stage with a snake. Without the snake, her act lost its edge. She was getting older, and exotic dancing was a young woman's game. She didn't know what her next move would be. Then, around 1950, she met a man named Rivers. His first name might have been William or Mark, but what mattered was that he was kind and made her feel loved again. They married, but the curse of tragedy followed her once more. Rivers died not long after their wedding, making him her third husband to die. After that, Alberta reportedly swore off marriage forever by 1952. She had returned to Los Angeles and was working at the Brass Rail nightclub. Sometimes she waited tables, other times she danced. But one night after a show, she was backstage telling jokes with a group of comedians. Her timing was perfect, her delivery was sharp, and her wit was razor quick. The club owner was so impressed that he offered her $125 a week to perform stand-up comedy. That's how Alberta Richmond, the girl who had danced with fire, became LaWanda Page, the comedian who would light up stages with laughter. Instead of flames, it wasn't long before she caught the attention of the comedy duo Skillet and Leroy Day, invited her to join their act, and the 3 of them created comedy magic together. For over 15 years, they toured the country, recording raunchy comedy albums that became underground favorites. LaWanda had found her new calling, and she was brilliant at it. Her comedy was raw, unapologetic, and wildly entertaining. She talked about things most comedians wouldn't even hint at, and audiences couldn't get enough. Then, in the early 1970s, fate intervened in the form of Aaron Russo, a white producer who was curious about the black comedy scene. One night, he went to see Skillet and Leroy perform. He enjoyed their set, but when LaWanda stepped onto the stage, something incredible happened. Russo couldn't stop laughing. He was blown away by her boldness, her timing, and her raw edge. At the time, Russo was working on a new show called Sanford and Son, and he immediately thought LaWanda would be perfect to play Fred Sanford's girlfriend. When Russo got back to the studio and described this amazing woman he had seen, Red Fox stopped him mid-sentence. "I know LaWanda," he said. "We grew up together. You want her on the show? I'll call her." It was like the universe had been waiting for this moment, when 2 childhood friends would be reunited to create television history. LaWanda came in to audition for the girlfriend role, but her no-nonsense attitude and fiery delivery didn't match what they had envisioned. However, another character was being developed, Aunt Esther Anderson. At first, everything seemed perfect, but LaWanda struggled on set. She missed her marks, looked away from the camera, stumbled over lines, and stuck too closely to the script without adding her own personality. Aaron Russo was ready to fire her, but Red Fox wasn't about to let that happen. "No way," he told Russo. "She's perfect for this. Give me 2 days. I'll work with her." When Russo hesitated, Fox laid down an ultimatum. "If she goes, I go." That's how much he believed in his childhood friend. Red didn't waste those 2 days. He brought LaWanda in privately and patiently walked her through everything. He taught her how to hit her marks, how to master the comedic pause, and how to tighten up her delivery. Technically, she was getting everything right, but something was still missing. Finally, Red pulled her aside and told her the brutal truth. "They still might let you go because you're not being you." That hit LaWanda like a lightning bolt. She had been trying to act like some generic church lady, but the role needed her spice, her bite, her own unique personality. The next day, she showed up completely transformed. She strutted onto the set, called Red an old fish-eyed fool, swung her purse like a weapon, and lit up the screen with that raw, unfiltered energy that had made her a star in nightclubs decades earlier. The producers were absolutely floored. They couldn't get enough of this woman who had found the perfect balance between comedy and attitude. Suddenly, Aunt Esther wasn't just a supporting character, she was a breakout star who could steal any scene she walked into. Behind the scenes, LaWanda was apparently quite the character. According to cast gossip, she allegedly showed up with whatever the crew might need to unwind after a long day of filming. Her wig might have been stiff and proper on camera, but behind the scenes, she was living life on her own terms. During the height of Sanford and Son's popularity in the 1970s, LaWanda was earning between $5,000 and $7,500 per episode. With seasons typically running 22-24 episodes, she was making up to $180,000 per year. Adjusted for inflation, that's equivalent to about $900,000 annually in today's money. She was also earning additional income from her comedy albums with titles like Watch It, Sucker, and Sane Advice that sold well within urban communities, but success in Hollywood doesn't always translate to lasting security. When Sanford and Son ended in 1977, LaWanda found herself facing the harsh reality that many actors experience. The offers dried up. There were brief talks about giving her own spin-off show, but those discussions never materialized. She appeared in the short-lived sequel series Sanford in 1980, but it only lasted one season. By the 1980s, Hollywood was closing its doors on her, and she was also dealing with the responsibility of caring for her elderly mother. With limited options, LaWanda returned to her comedy roots, performing in small clubs across the country. Her act was raw, unapologetic, and definitely not suitable for television audiences. Some people probably left her shows clutching their pearls, but they always laughed. This underground comedy circuit carried her through much of the 1980s and into the 1990s. Unlike many Hollywood stars who moved to Beverly Hills or the Hollywood Hills, LaWanda chose to stay in South Los Angeles, in the neighborhoods where she had first developed her comedic voice. She lived in a modest one-story house, nothing glamorous by celebrity standards, but it was real and it was home. The house had a simple front yard, barred windows common to the area, and a welcoming porch, where neighbors knew her name. Inside, friends and family remember the home being filled with vintage furniture, African-American art, gospel records, and photos of family and friends. As the 1990s progressed, LaWanda began appearing in small film roles again. One of her most recognizable appearances was in the 1995 cult classic Friday, where she played a memorable character that reminded audiences of her comedic timing. But these were just occasional appearances. She was mostly staying out of the spotlight. And what many people didn't know was that her health was beginning to decline. LaWanda had been diagnosed with diabetes, a condition that would eventually lead to her death. The disease was taking its toll on her body, and in her final years, she was sometimes seen performing on stage in a wheelchair. Even failing health couldn't completely extinguish the fire that had burned within her since childhood. Behind the scenes, LaWanda's daughter Clara had begun helping to care for her as her condition worsened. What many people don't know is that LaWanda was quietly giving back to her community throughout her later years. She donated an estimated $20,000 to the Watts Community Center in the late 1980s, a substantial amount for the time. This nonprofit provided meals, tutoring, and after-school programs to underserved children. She frequently participated in fundraising events, often performing free stand-up sets to raise money and awareness. Her home became an informal safe haven for many who needed advice, encouragement, or just someone who understood their struggles. On September 14, 2002, LaWanda Page passed away at Centinela Hospital in Los Angeles from a heart attack caused by complications from diabetes. She was 81 years old. Donald Welch, the director of a gospel musical she had starred in, said something beautiful about her that has become her unofficial epitaph. LaWanda lived the life she loved and loved the life she lived. The question of LaWanda's abandoned house has intrigued fans for years. After her death, the modest South Los Angeles home where she had lived for decades sat empty for a time. Like many properties in the area, it showed signs of aging and neglect. The house that had once been filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of a woman who had touched millions of lives through her performances became a silent monument to her memory. What was particularly heartbreaking was that LaWanda's daughter Clara, who had been caring for her in her final years, passed away just 4 years later in 2006 at the age of 69. With Clara's death, the direct family line that could have maintained the property was gone. The house stood as a reminder of a life lived fully, of dreams achieved against all odds, and of the temporary nature of material things. There have been persistent rumors about LaWanda Page and Lynn Hamilton, who played Donna on Sanford and Son, being biological sisters, but Lynn Hamilton herself set the record straight in interviews, explaining that she and LaWanda had developed such a close friendship during their time on the show that LaWanda began introducing her as her sister everywhere they went. Lynn recalled LaWanda saying to her, "You know, I just love you. I feel like you're my sister." It was a testament to the kind of person LaWanda was. someone who created family wherever she went. LaWanda Page's net worth at the time of her death was estimated at around $500,000. While this might seem modest by today's celebrity standards, it represented a lifetime of hard work and smart financial decisions. She had invested in real estate, saved money from her television work, and continued earning from her comedy performances. Throughout her life, more importantly, she had invested in her community and in the people around her. The story of LaWanda Page's abandoned house is really the story of a life well-lived coming to its natural end. The house sat empty not because it was forgotten, but because the person who had made it a home was no longer there. It serves as a reminder that even the most vibrant lives eventually come to a close, and that the true legacy of a person lies not in the buildings they leave behind, but in the impact they had on the people they touched. LaWanda Page broke barriers for Black female comedians, creating a voice that was uniquely her own. She showed the world that a woman could be funny, fierce, and unforgettable, all at the same time. From the little girl who danced for coins on Cleveland sidewalks, to the fire dancer who captivated audiences around the world, from the comedian who made people laugh until their sides hurt to the television star who became a cultural icon, LaWanda Page lived a life that was anything but ordinary. Her story reminds us that success isn't just about fame or money. It's about staying true to yourself, supporting others along the way, and never losing the fire that makes you who you are. The abandoned house may have crumbled, but LaWanda Page's spirit lives on in every comedian who dares to be different, every performer who refuses to be silenced, and every person who believes that dreams can come true no matter where you start. She proved that sometimes the most extraordinary stories come from the most unexpected places, and that's a lesson worth remembering long after.